All right, good evening, everybody. I want to welcome you to the Education for Tomorrow Alliance Distinguished Speaker Series for February 15th. We are excited to have you guys with us. My name is Corinne Coulter, and I'm the Program Director at EfTA. And if this is your first time joining us, welcome. If you have been on any of our calls that we've hosted, I guess we're going on semester 6 of doing these. And so we've had a handful of these each semester, really since about 2020, 2021. And so we're excited to have you guys here. I am excited for you guys to hear tonight's speaker, but I just want to go over a couple of logistics before we get started. We are in a webinar form, so we cannot see you or hear you, but you will have the opportunity to ask some questions on the back half of the hour. And so you can either use the chat or you can use the Q&A feature, or you can hover down on the bottom of your bar and you can see the raise your hand feature. At that point, when it's time for you to ask your question, I'll bring you over, ask you to unmute, allow you to ask your question, and then I'll send you back as an attendee. If you don't have access to a microphone, just let me know that whenever you're typing in your question so that I don't do the whole, did you hear me, all that. If you are here for credit for one of your classes, we don't have the form that you don't need to turn that into us, nor do you have to turn in your one pager to us. You'll submit that to whatever teacher or headmaster has tasked you with being here tonight. So with that, I will get us started on our hour for this month, and I'm happy to turn it over to Brent Wunderlich, who is with McKesson, but is also one of our EFTA board members, to help us introduce our speaker this evening.
All right, thank you, Corinne, and good evening, everybody. This is a little after dinner time or before, just depends. I've got two small kids, so my task was to get them fed before I jump in here to introduce your speaker tonight. So I'm happy to introduce Frans Kopp. Frans is a retired engineer and project manager for Shell. I've had the opportunity to cross paths with him as an EFTA volunteer when we've done some career panels, and he has a wonderful story. As I was reading through and refreshing, I started to remember some of the stories that he had shared on some of the days. So a wealth of experience here, not just because he's worked for Shell as an international company, but because he spent time all over the world doing offshore deep water oil and gas pipeline work in Gulf of Mexico, and also Nigeria, Brazil, Southeast Asia, and I'm sure there are probably some others. Since his retirement, he's really poured himself into some of his hobbies, including music. Loves to sing and play the piano. I don't know if there'll be time for a song, but we'll see if that's he's shaking his head though. And he's also an active member of Citizens Client Organization, and I'm assuming that he would probably speak some of that, a nonprofit grassroots advocacy agency that's focused on policy to address climate change and sustainable transition to clean energy. So I think he knows what he's talking about, considering what he did for a career. So again, Frans, it's really great to have you, and thank you for your support of EFTA. And with that, Frans, over to you.
Well, thank you, Brett, for the introduction, and also Corinne for just giving me the opportunity to talk about something that is very dear to my heart. I volunteer with the Citizens Climate Organization. I call it organization. Our true name is CCL, Citizens Climate Lobby, but lobby doesn't really sound all that good. So we're actually trying to change the name to Citizens Climate. And I want to talk with you guys a little bit about our climate challenges and solutions we're all working on to help us reduce so-called greenhouse gases that warm the planet, raise sea levels, and how you, as high schoolers, can help us adults who don't really have all the answers. So I am going to share my screen to give you a little presentation. And then afterwards, I hope you all have some questions. And bear with me. I participate in a lot of Zoom calls, but I don't usually share my screen. So if I mess up a little bit, bear with me. Okay, share. Can you guys, Corinne, am I good here?
Yes, you are good.
Okay, so other than that, I need to move this there. Understanding the climate challenge and some of the solutions that you can help with. And there's going to be an important slide later on with all the things that you as high schoolers can help us adults solve the challenges we have. And here's a good picture of a bunch of high schoolers who participated already in some of our workshops. So let's see how I am. Oh, there. Okay, my story. So as you as I was introduced, I'm a retired offshore oil and gas pipeline engineering advisor, which is just a mouthful. But as you can see from my picture, if you're looking at the right bottom corner, you see a little bit of a backpack there. And my wife and I love to hike and travel to other countries. I was a civil engineer, but I worked in building offshore pipelines. And you may just think, well, what is an offshore pipeline? And I worked in really deep water. Now, that doesn't mean that I went into deep water, but I designed these pipelines and then helped build them and supervised construction. It was really awesome work. I worked for Shell and other companies for over 35 years, and we went deeper and deeper and deeper and to depths where divers can't dive. I mean, to give you a feel for it, that is, we went over a mile deep. So we used the same kind of robots that they used to fly and deposit on Mars and the moon. We worked with similar companies that do space work. So it was really exciting work. So I retired in 2015. And from my accent, you probably hear that I am not from Texas. I was actually born in Holland, land of the windmills and the tulips. And Netherlands actually means lowlands. So much of Holland is below the sea level. So you question maybe, well, if we're below sea level, how do we keep from flooding? Well, our defenses against sea and river flooding have been natural dunes near the sea, dikes, and yes, windmills, as you can see here, that have been pumping out water since 1450. So that is a long time ago. And some of these windmills still operate. And we still have several hundred windmills that have been built in the past centuries that work. They saw wood, they pump water out, they mill grain, etc. So what happened in 1953? Well, in 1953, a severe winter storm caused a storm tide off the North Sea. The sea flooded land up to 18 foot above sea level, and it cost in Holland alone 1,800 deaths. So was that a result of climate change? No. But we took action, and over many, many years, they built storm surge barriers, raised the dikes, and right now they are also preparing for a rise in sea level that is going to come as a result of climate change. So what I want to talk to you all about is, what do we already know about climate change? Who are Citizens Climate Lobby? What solutions do we support? And what specific actions can you take to help us maintain a livable world? So I'm going to do a quick poll. And of course, I can't see who raises their hands. So I'm going to just assume that some of you answer yes to the first question, or yes to the third question, or I'm totally up on this stuff, which means you can ask me really, really tough questions at the end of the presentation that I might not be able to answer, but I'll get back to you on that. So what is our scientific consensus? Yeah, there is a consensus that global warming is real. And that's not just because Texas had the hottest temperature last year. This has been going on for decades. It's caused by increased greenhouse gases. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what greenhouse gases actually are. And human activity is causing almost all the increase. Not all of it, but quite a bit. There are still people who are not convinced, and that's okay. And I am not going to try and convince you today. I am just trying to give you some information that may help you think a little bit more about it, do some checking, and then hopefully decide, okay, maybe I can help you. So what do people actually think about the effects of climate change? Well, there's a polling company called Potential Energy, and they tested lots of different climate messages with about 60,000 people. So that's a large group of people in 23 countries. And on average, close to 80% of the people agreed with this statement. It is essential our government does whatever it takes to limit the effects of climate change. Well, what does that actually mean? Our government does whatever it takes. Well, that whatever it takes is really the crux of the matter, because there really is no free lunch. We cannot just totally eliminate all fossil fuels or whatever without any cost to it. So, and I personally and CCL, Citizens Climate Lobby, we do not think that it's up to the government alone. I think we all play a big role in helping us get to a point where perhaps the next generation or the generation thereafter can still live in a sustainable climate. That's probably one of the main reasons I joined the Citizens Climate Lobby. We have an 18-month-old grandson, and I started thinking, wow, I mean, so I'm right now, I'm almost 70 years old. So when he goes to college, I'll be close to 90. It doesn't really matter what happens to the climate when I'm 90 years old, but he is then 20 years old. And by golly, I mean, I hope that he still lives on a planet that is healthy and doesn't have pollution and is sustainable. So greenhouse gases. What are greenhouse gases? Well, this is, I'm not going to get into too much detail, but greenhouse gases are gases like CO2, carbon dioxide, and methane. And what happens is the sun that hits the earth is reflected, partially absorbed, partially used, because that's where we get our energy from. But the reflection can become heat if it is trapped by these gases in the atmosphere. So what has been happening over the last probably 100 or so years is we have been trapping more and more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And that is gradually warming the earth and the oceans. And the biggest contributors to emitting these greenhouse gases are fossil fuels. And so what are fossil fuels? Well, they are coal, they're natural gas, they're crude oil that is being used to in refineries to make gasoline, and all that sort of things. But it's not just gasoline. It's a lot more than gasoline. So what we're up against is, due to that heat trapping, there's more record-setting temperatures, extreme weather events. There's, of course, pollution that affects our health, rising sea levels, and we know sea levels are rising. We measure it every year. There's potentially more severe droughts, or, on the other hand, monsoons. These increases in ocean temperature affect all sea life. There's been big changes in salmon and other fish life populations. We've all seen what happens to polar bears that are being diverted from where they used to live because there's not enough sea ice in the North Pole. But we also have to recognize that everything that we do has a lot of uncertainties. Yeah, so we can predict with a certain amount of probability or likelihood that something is going to happen. Doesn't mean that it is actually exactly going to happen. We predict that if we don't change anything in what we do today, then potentially in 20 years, there will be about a 3-4 degree increase in temperature, and that could have big consequences. But is it 3 degrees or 4 degrees or 5 degrees? It all depends on a lot of different things. So the simple question is, well, why don't we just eliminate fossil fuels? Yeah. Well, if we think about what fossil fuels are used for, they're not just used for gasoline, diesel, aviation, but you're sitting in a chair and the material that the chair was made from, whether it's metal or whether it's plastic or cloth, used fossil fuels to create the plastic. The clothes you're wearing, that used fossil materials. Yeah, food additives. Yeah, it's really weird to think that fossil fuels, you think of gasoline, they put gasoline in food. No, but there are products that are made from fossil fuels that are used to make these uh, uh, food additives, fertilizer, all that sort of things. So all we can do right now is we can reduce the amount of fossil fuels we use, and we can reduce the emissions of CO2 from burning fossil fuels by burning them cleaner. I don't know what is happening. It probably is my mouse that is doing things, but hey, bear with me. So cleaner energy sources will help. Yeah, cleaner burning of fossil fuels. The United States is actually one of the best countries in the world in terms of emissions per amount or per unit fossil fuel burned. We have really low emissions, but we're using a lot of it. We can try to capture carbon. You've all heard of wind and solar, and without wind and solar, and Texas has more wind and solar energy than any other energy. So that is helping tremendously. You can get energy from geothermal wells. For example, we were in Iceland a year ago, and no one needs to pay for hot water because it's free, because it comes from all these geothermal wells. Now, it tastes really bad. It's got some hydrogen sulfide in it, but it is free. And in fact, people are working in the US on geothermal wells. And in my home country, In Holland, they're drilling geothermal wells and heating houses with it. Hydropower, wherever you have big rivers with big elevation drops, like in Brazil and Norway, they can use the power of water to drive turbines that create electricity. Of course, there's nuclear energy. In France, especially, France gets about 70 to 80% of their energy, of their electric energy from nuclear power plants. China, India, and of course, the key thing is use less energy, better insulation of our homes, and the power of innovation. So how long do we have? Well, there are lots of international panels, and they say, okay, we have until 2030 to cut our emissions by 50% to avoid the worst consequences. So one of the questions you may ask is, well, should we just give up? Because that is an unrealistically short timeline. Is being alarmist helpful? Like, is the world going to end in 2030? No, it's not going to end. And what can you do personally? And that's what we'll talk about a little bit more. So it's the wait and see approach versus the let's get going approach. And the Citizens Climate Lobby that was established about 14 years ago was done to just for the grassroots level folks to take action out of personal conviction and to deliver a roadmap to get to a better place, to make a difference today. And we have lots of chapters, I think it's over 400 chapters in the United States that organize. And the key thing is that we're respectful. We are nonpartisan. We don't talk about politics. We don't say we're red or blue. And as you can see, lots of young people and older people, just a whole group of people, they come together every year in Washington in June, early June, and they have a combined lobby effort. And I can say in June, I'll be going. It'll be my first time, and I'm really excited about doing this. So what makes a good climate solution? Well, we drive large-scale changes. Oops, let me go back. I'm going forward. Oops, let me go see if I can go back. There. And we look out for those who can least afford rising energy costs, and that needs to be healthy for the planet. And we try to convince our lawmakers that they need to use incentives that support choices people make. Do I install a solar panel on my roof? Do I buy an electric vehicle? So the policy agenda is, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, carbon pricing, healthy forests, building electrification, and clean energy permitting reform. So carbon pricing, what is that? Well, we advocate for a carbon fee. You can already imagine a carbon fee means you pay for the amount of carbon that you emit. And then there's lots of other things that I won't bore you yet with, but this picture probably, will kind of, a picture tells you 1,000 words. Well, this is a good picture. You place first a fee on fossil fuels at the source, at the mine or the well or a port. Then you return all the revenue from that fee to the households. So they get money to put solar panels in, or to put a heat pump in, or to perhaps help buy a hybrid or an electric vehicle, or to do better insulation in the house. And then, of course, so that we can stay competitive with other areas in the world, we put a border adjustment, and we call that CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, on goods that we get from, say, China or other places that don't have a price in carbon. So in 2021, this is kind of an old view graph, because you see everyone still wearing masks. So this was just during and after COVID. We helped pass a lot of climate bills, and there's way too many to list, but we were very, very successful there in helping explain things to legislators and helping pass bills. We joined efforts in budgets, and it's always about money. Yeah. So we had over 168,000 calls and emails to Congress and President Biden. We reached millions of people through text and phone banking. We published 3,400 op-eds and letters to the editor of Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, the Washington Post, New York Times, etc. So we were very active, and it is all by volunteers. No one gets paid to do this kind of stuff. We wrote almost 4,000 letters to these newspapers, and we tracked it all on a fantastic website. And so you get little kudos for how many letters you write and how many people you talked with. We have a Facebook, Twitter, or X account. And this gets me to the most important slide of all, because this is all fine and dandy. But if you can't do anything, then, I mean, what's the point? Yeah, it's all the adults. I mean, blame the adults. You can try to recycle, yeah, but that doesn't do a whole lot. So I'm going to talk about a few of these bullet items here. And Ms. Corinne will send out a note after this presentation that has all these links in it that you can click on and do some further investigation of. And so I'm just going to skip through them and just show you just a little bit of them. So this is our youth action team. Yeah, and you can see this is not all adults. These are young adults who will write. And in fact, those of you who participated in the science fair, some of you may have, there's a lot of earth science stuff going on there. And this past February, I was a judge, and just a few weeks ago, and there were just a lot of projects that dealt with reducing pollution, how to get microplastics from water and that sort of thing. So great, fantastic. There's a youth outreach guide that you can look at, and it kind of tells you what you can do. You can create a youth team. You can conduct youth outreach. There's just tons and tons of things that you can participate in that will help us all. Youth, or you, are the future. Yeah, I'm going to share just one quick YouTube with you of one of the young women in North Carolina, and I thought it was a really good
Citizens Climate
YouTube.
Lobby because I had been wanting to do my part and join the climate movement, and so I was looking for an organization through which I could advocate with. When I came across CCL in my search, I joined because I was so excited for all the opportunities for me to not only take action immediately, but also valuable opportunities that make me feel empowered. Since joining CCL, I've tried taking advantage of these opportunities. I joined my local Raleigh-Durham chapter, and I have participated in some of the teams with them. I also co-started the North Carolina Triangle U team, and I've been a leader with them ever since. Some of my other accomplishments include having gone to DC to lobby at the November lobbying conference. And I've also made a number of presentations, including to an environmental club, to at a summer camp, and to a diverse audience of both young and old, and within CCL at a national conference and regional conference.
So you see that there are opportunities there for you, and then there is something really exciting in the greater Houston area that perhaps, and I don't know if this will work in the Woodlands and the Conroe area, but it's certainly going on in the Houston area, which is the Great School Electrification Challenge. And again, this is something you all can potentially participate in. There's a challenge round. And this is about how to electrify schools and make them more, eliminate gas boilers and all that sort of things to heat your schools, install heat pumps. And it's another opportunity for you to learn and to participate. So get with your friends and buddies, look at it and say, hey, can we do something in the Woodlands, Conroe area? And then potentially consider, if you participate in the science fair through EfTA, consider climate and energy related projects. There were a lot of them this year. And I think 3-4 years ago, there were not nearly as many. So that's wonderful too. Oops, I'll go back. And then there is a summer intern program. My mouse is having a mind of its own. There's a summer intern program that I'll show you in a minute that you can apply for in the Woodlands area. It's unpaid, but you can learn a tremendous amount by interning with CCL Woodlands chapter. So obviously this is a Zoom call, so I'm asking questions. Let's discuss. What did you learn today that's important? What actions can you take? I promise you, I'm not touching my mouse. It's just doing things. It's like what a mouse does. It's like has a mind of its own. And what questions do you have? So I would hope that with this brief presentation, I have given you some things to think about. I have also given you some links that you can look at after this presentation and say, hey, how about this or how about that? And you know, the worst thing that can happen is you try and then you decide, no, this is not for me. But who knows, if a year from now, you may decide, now I have a little bit more time. Now I can get involved. So my question really, or my hope is that we can discuss and that we have some insights and questions. And Miss Corinne, I think I did okay. I stayed pretty much in the 30 minutes. So I'm actually pretty proud of myself that I managed to do it, because I'm an engineer and engineers tend to just ramble on and just keep going. And the facilitator is looking at their clock and thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to run way over time. But
no, we still have plenty of time. So we still got 30 minutes. So that was great. Students, we've already started, some people have already started using, but if you have questions or you want to put in kind of the things that you learned and answering some of those questions, you can use the chat or you can use the Q&A. And we did have a question that came in just asking more about the internship link. I think that link is on the page that you sent me that I will send out later,
Yes.
but just if you have more and want to share it, Gabriel was asking, and I know
Yes.
internships are a big thing with these kids here. So if
Yeah.
you have
So I'm
details on that, I'm
still,
sure
yeah,
they will know.
I am still sharing screen, I think.
Mhm.
So this summer
Yeah.
internship program, and this will be in the handout.
Okay.
It's to support the expansion of our organization through community outreach. We're all volunteers, so we're always looking for help. Planning events like Earth Day. Well, Earth Day will be past by the time that you're a summer intern, but there's a lot of things that we're planning for the fall that a summer student can help with. And you report to the local leadership team. Well, that sounds a whole lot more official than it really is. Yeah, we're all, most of us are indeed retired. And not all of us, but and we're all easygoing. Yeah, so this is not like a boss. This is just you report to a really cool guy who I've known for quite some time, and you just help out. It's not like it's not as official as it sounds. So if I go to the next, yeah, so you do need to be able to commit, and I would say it's probably more 15 than 20 hours, but it really totally depends on you. Uh, this is not the first year we've done it. We've done this for several years. And without any exception, all the interns have always said, this was a great, great opportunity. Certainly looks good on your resume. Um, you do, I mean, and I know this will potentially exclude some of you, but it says here applicants must be 18 years old and US citizens. So some of you may not be quite at that age, so you'll need to wait a while. And I don't know how stringent that is, but you can, I have a bot at the bottom, there's a contact, Bob Jones, really cool guy, lives in the Conroe area, and you can email him and ask him all kinds of questions. So this will be part of the handout, and I hope that answers kind of goes towards answering a little bit of the question that was asked.
Yeah, and students, I'm going to throw this in there just from an EFTA standpoint. If you've taken on that email and you choose to send an email, I would send maybe like a cover letter or a resume or a blurb, something about you, so that, I mean, you can say that this is how you learned about CCL, but just throwing that out there so that you can kind of get who you are in that first email, as opposed to just like, I want to learn more about this. So I'm just going to throw that in there as far as EFTA. So thank you, Frans. Looks like we did have a question. So Jordan, I'm going to find you and bring you over. Ask you to unmute.
Oh yeah, I'm unmuted.
Yeah.
Oh,
Let us know your question.
so why are greenhouse gases called greenhouse gases?
Well, so I'm going to explain this the way that I learned about what a greenhouse was when I lived in Holland. Yeah, you may not know that Holland is Holland is a pretty small country, very small. But we are one of the biggest exporters of agricultural products, tomatoes, all kinds of things. Well, Holland also gets cold. I mean, even in the summer, it can get pretty cold, but in the winter, it gets cold. And so the way to grow vegetables, flowers sometimes too. I mean, in Holland, you can get flowers every single day of the year. Well, they're not always grown outside, of course. So they're all grown in greenhouses. So a greenhouse basically is, and the name says it, it's a glass enclosure, and the glass traps the heat inside and allows the heat to come in from the sun. And then you can maintain a good temperature. So that's basically what the CO2 is doing. And so that's where the name and the phrase greenhouse comes from. Does that answer your question? Well, since you muted
Yes, sir.
yourself, I assume it did.
Oh, yeah, it did. Thank you.
All right, so we had another question come in, and Benjamin's microphone's not working, so I will ask it for him. How do you feel about carbon capture? The way some people talk about it, it sounds like a miracle cure. Do you think that it will be practical at a large scale soon enough to be pivotal in the fight against climate change?
So you want me to just kind of address that in so
Yeah, I don't know what
yes.
the question means, so it's on you.
So carbon capture is certainly something that, first of all, it's already being commercially done. There is Chevron, for example, in West Texas, has a big plant where they're using processes to capture carbon from the air and also CO2. And this is carbon capture is not just like you're picking carbon molecules from the air. Yeah, that's also possible, but it's a lot more difficult. But when we talk about carbon capture, it is more like capturing the CO2 emissions from power plants or from fabrication processes, and then putting this gas, instead of letting it escape into the air, putting it into pipelines that then can transport this gas to a central facility where they can then drill wells into reservoirs that are often pretty deep and inject the CO2 into these reservoirs where it can just stay forever. Yeah. And so that is the easiest way to capture carbon. Now, there are also, and this is, I talked about the power of innovation. There are also companies, startup companies, that work on actually trying to capture CO2 from our atmosphere, which is a lot harder to do. And I'm not smart enough to explain to you how they do it. It is not inexpensive. In fact, it's very expensive. Otherwise, it would already be done in a large scale. But right now, most of the carbon capture that takes place is capture emissions from power plants and other sources and just injecting it into the ground. And for that, you need a pipeline and transport that CO2, which is a gas, to this underground storage. Really good question. Challenge
Thank
me.
you. Well, we had a question come in from Sophie, so I'm going to bring her over. And Sophie, if you can unmute. Okay, maybe not. She was asking, let's see, how would you display this idea onto a science fair project? So if you were to, like, you've judged many times with us in science fair, based on some of the projects that you saw, or maybe some of the research and things that you guys have done. What do you think that could look like for a high school student if doing a project like that is kind of what they stepped in and said, this is what I can do?
Well, so I think there's lots of opportunities. Sophie, if you, oops, she disappeared. But I think I know who Sophie is.
She can still hear you. I just
Oh,
moved
okay.
her over.
So,
Yeah.
how do you, yeah, how would you apply this to a science project? Well, I'll just list a few. Yeah, I mean, it was the last science fair that I did, and I think this is something that you would have to talk with your science teacher about. I'm sure that she or he would have lots of different topics that you could work on, but it ranges from a lot of different ideas. There was someone who was trying to compute what the effect was of reducing our emissions from carpooling, yeah, and using the contraflow lanes. And she did a lot of statistics analysis, got a lot of data together from various sources, and was able to demonstrate the reduction in emissions due to carpooling, and showing the advantage of that. I talked a little bit about uh, some students, and there were 3 or 4 projects that had to do with removing pollutants from either wastewater or drinking water. So we've all heard about lead contamination in drinking water. Well, there's also contamination from copper. There is contamination from the microplastics that, I mean, you can't see the microplastics. They are so small, but they come from, if you use a plastic cover on something that you heat in the microwave, well, that puts a bunch of microplastics in the food that you're trying to heat. So you may heat something really healthy, but if you heat it in plastic, that is not such a good idea. So what they did is they tried to figure out how we can actually, and then you wash that plastic dish or whatever it is, and so that goes into your wastewater. Well, how do you then remove these microplastics from the wastewater? One of the students decided, okay, I'm going to look at using ultrasonic radiation to remove these microplastics. Another student used another method. So I think the I think you all have a tremendous benefit over what we used to have when we were in high school, because the only source of information we had was to go to the library and look at books, and or if you're lucky, your parents had an encyclopedia and you could look things up. But it was a lot of actually physically going somewhere. Right now with the internet, there is so much information out there, and you just use Google's AI tool, Bard, or whatever it is, and it's like, okay, let's ask Bard, how do I do this, or this? And then you get started there. Yeah. Or ask your friends or ask your parents, uh, hey, how about this? Yeah. Or how about if I do that? What would be the result? So I think coming up with subjects, your teacher can help. And then from there, it just goes. You just try it out. And it doesn't matter whether you win or not. That's not the objective. The objective is, did you learn something from it? And did you do it in a way that is organized and where you can tell someone else about it? And Miss Corinne can probably tell you lots more about science fairs than I can.
Great, thank you. Can you talk about, we've had whether they've been on panels like you've done before, they've been science fair judges, they've been part of our Distinguished Speaker Series, people that have spent a lot of time in a career and then later on have found, or during that time in career have found something else that they're passionate about, just like you have in your presentation, sharing that presentation here today. Is there, like the work that you did at Shell, have you seen there's a lot of crossover in what you've been learning through CCL and that work, and learning about different things within climate change? Has there been a lot of crossover in what you studied and in the work that you spent years doing within pipeline and things like that?
Yeah, it's kind of weird, isn't it, that you have an oil and gas engineer who worked for 30 plus years in fossil fuels become a member of the Citizens Climate Organization and is promoting reducing our use of fossil fuels. But there's a lot of us like that. I mean, in our woodlands chapter alone, I think half of the people are retired as engineers, chemical engineers, or naval architects from Exxon, Chevron, Shell. And I think what we have in common is A, we don't play golf all day. We want to do something that is challenging. B, we tend to have kids and grandkids, so we want to ensure a better future. And we're scientists. Yeah, so we are people who are committed to understanding things. So whether I worked in oil and gas or not is less relevant than the fact that the crossover is in that we don't take someone's word for granted. When someone says, this is what it is, we tend to say, okay, well, let me check into that. So that's the crossover. It is critical thinking, and it is also being able to listen to others, because I'm one who pushes back at times. And we push back, and then someone else pushes back. And as long as the conversation stays civil and we don't spout off nonsense, then we can come together and do a lot of things. So I'm not surprised that it is a lot of oil and gas people who are the ones driving the conversation. Does that help?
Does, thank you. We did have another question come in, and with a student without a mic. My science fair project is about reducing synthetic refrigerants through air conditioners by using airborne water instead. So you think that would make a significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions since current refrigerants trap heat?
Well, I think that's a really interesting topic, and it's something I hadn't even thought about as a possibility. So, I mean, I don't quite understand the physics of how that would work, but I do know that making refrigerants for air conditioners requires fossil fuels. Yeah, so any way to reduce the amount of fossil fuels it takes to make a refrigerant would definitely help. Now, you then have to ask yourself, is the refrigerant that you plan to use, is it as efficient and cost effective as the refrigerants that we're using now? You know, probably that new air conditioning units in cars and in the air conditioning units for your homes, they already use a far more environmentally friendly refrigerant than the typical old style refrigerants that were being used. So they're already being phased out. There's still some old air conditioning units that use the old refrigerants, but it is extremely expensive to buy the Freon that is used in these old units. I mean, if your air conditioner starts leaking, you probably pay more for the Freon to fill it back up than if you would say, well, let's get a new compressor with the new refrigerant because I can't afford this. So I think you first got to look at the physics. Is it possible to use as a coolant? And then how efficient is it? It would make a great project if you could prove that, but I'm not smart enough to say, okay, yeah, that would work. No, I mean, it'll take some checking, but that's what Google or Bing or whatever is for. Yeah, it's all out there. There is so much information out there. So do your search and start searching.
And we know from history, if you're in the science fair here locally and you're one of those students, you guys are very smart and very on top of things. So thank you for the question. We're getting close to our time, and I want to make sure to respect your time, but then students, I think you guys have a holiday tomorrow, so you already get points tonight for being here before you don't have to be at school tomorrow, with it being a 4-day weekend for you guys. But can you talk about, I know you've been on our panels before, you know a lot of the kids that come through all of our programs are high school age, but what is one thing that maybe if you were sitting in their shoes today and facing situations like this, or starting to have thoughts about what can I do later on, what can I do now to help later on, whether that's climate change or anything. I mean, how do I better prepare myself to be able to be this type of person in a career, or be this parent, or what's that something that you wish that you knew that you could maybe share with them in helping them kind of take that first step in making a change or finding something that they're passionate about? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does, because it gets asked a lot. And I think to everyone on the panels will probably say kind of the same thing, which is you got to be flexible. Don't expect that unless you become a heart surgeon or a veterinarian or something that is really specialized, don't expect that you're going to have just one single career for the rest of your life. Yeah, and I think if I can convey anything is be curious and try to learn. Yeah, and if something doesn't work out, don't be afraid to say, it didn't quite work out. I need to do something else, even if it means going to night school or whatever to learn a new trade or to get a new course, take a new course. Things are changing so rapidly. I'm kind of glad that I'm retired, that I don't need to learn anything about AI, because it's like, oh, wow, that is overwhelming. But it doesn't need to be overwhelming if you take it one step at a time. But the key is realize that what you're learning in school is critical thinking, especially, and be organized, be able to communicate, talk. That's really one of the big things in the science fairs, is it can be intimidating to talk to all these grown-ups. Well, you're not going to get fired if you mess up there. And everyone is really supportive. So use the opportunities. Yeah, use the opportunities to talk. And something that some of you may not like is learn to teamwork. Yeah, many of you will say, I can do this project on my own. Well, that isn't going to get you anywhere in the working world unless you become a brilliant professor who can sit in his or her office and write down equations that blow the world away. So learn to work together, even if you don't like it. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. That was great. All right, so we're getting close to our 7:30 time, and students, if you have any other questions, throw those in really quick. But if not, we want to make sure we respect everybody's time. Can you help me thank Mr. Frans Kopp in our chat for thank him for joining us this evening, sharing just a little bit about a little bit about your work, but then the things that you become passionate about over time, and giving these students ways to get involved and ways to start to be part of the change. So we appreciate you taking time. Students, we appreciate you guys for joining us tonight. We have a couple more sessions of distinguished speaker for the rest of the semester. You can find those on our website, but I will follow up in an email with you guys tomorrow with just a quick survey on tonight, and then all of the links that Frans shared that were hyperlinked so that you can read more about that, learn more about the internship program. And then if you have questions, you can always reach out to me, or I can help get you in touch with Frans and the rest of the CCL group here locally. So students, thank you guys for putting in those chats. And I hope you guys have a great evening, and students, a great 4-day weekend that you're going into this week.
And thank you all for being there. And thank you, Miss Corinne, for organizing it and allowing me to talk about something that I'm passionate about.